Hi, we're going to be reading Miss Awful by Arthur Kavanagh. It's a little long though, so parts of it I'm just going to summarize for you and then other parts I'll read. So the story begins with Roger Clark, who's in third grade, begging his dad to take him to the park on Sunday evening, even though he had spelling homework that he hadn't finished. He said it was okay if he didn't get it done because his teacher had an emergency to take care of and wasn't going to be there anyway. During the conversation, he made some grammatical errors, and his sister Elizabeth made fun of him for being dopey. Roger will miss his teacher, and he said, "Well, I like Miss Wilson. She's fun. Last week, for instance, when Tommy Miller got tired of staying in his seat and lay down on the floor." "He did what?" Roger's father asked. "Sure, pretty soon the whole class was lying down. Know what Miss Wilson did? She lay down on the floor, too." Roger went on ecstatically. "She said we'd all have a rest. It was perfectly normal in the middle of the day. That's what I love about St. Jeff's. It's fun." "Fun," snorted his sister. "School isn't supposed to be a fun fest. It's supposed to be filling that empty noodle of yours." Mr. Clark repeated, "Miss Wilson got down on the floor?" He had met Roger's teacher on occasion. She had struck him as capable but excessively whimsical. She was a large woman to be getting down on floors, Mr. Clark thought. "What did the class do next?" he asked. "Oh, we lay there a while, then got up and did a Mexican hat dance," Roger answered. "It was swell." I'm sure not every day is as frolicsome," Mrs. Clark continued, slightly anxious. She brought in dessert, a chocolate mousse. Roger's story sounded typical of St. Jeffrey's. Not that she was unhappy with his school. A small private institution, while it might be called overly permissive, it projected a warm, homey atmosphere which Miss Clark found appealing. It was church affiliated, which she approved of, and heaven knows its location a few blocks away from the brownstone was convenient. True, Roger's scholastic progress wasn't notable. His spelling, for example, remained atrocious. Friendly as St. Jeffrey's was, Mrs. Clark sometimes did wish. They do end up going to the park, and Roger does not finish his homework. The next morning, they get to school. Roger brings a bunch of toys, as he usually does, and the substitute teacher is incredibly strict. By the time the 8:45 bell rang, Roger had finished a game of tag, traded several baseball cards, and was launched in an exciting jump the hydrant contest. Miss Gillis, the school secretary, was in charge of the bell, and she had to clang it extensively before the student body took notice. Clomping up the front steps, they spilled into the downstairs hall, headed in various directions. Roger's class swarmed up the stairs in great spirits. Tommy Miller, Bruce Reeves, Joey Lambert, the girls forming an untidy rear flank behind them, shrill with laughter. It wasn't until the front ranks reached the third grade classroom that the first ominous note was struck. "Hey, what's going on?" Jimmy Moore demanded, first to observe the changed appearance of the room. The other children crowded behind him in the doorway. Instead of a cozy semicircle of desks, the chairs had been rearranged in stiff, rigid rows. "Gee, look, the desks are in rows," commented Midge Fuller, a plump little girl who stood blocking Roger's view. Midge was a child given to unnecessary statements. "It's raining today," she would volunteer to her classmates, all of them in raincoats. Or, "There's a lunch bell, gang." The point to Roger wasn't that the desks had been rearranged. The point was why. As if in answer, he heard two hands clap behind him, as loud and menacing as thunder. "What's this? What's this?" barked a stern, raspous voice. "You are not cattle milling in a pen. Enough foolish gaping. Come, form into lines." Heads turned in unison, mouths fell open. The children of St. Geoffrey's third grade had never formed into lines of any sort. But this was not the cause of their shock. Each was staring with a sensation similar to that of drowning at the owner of the raspest voice. She was tall and straight as a ruler, and was dressed in an ancient tweed suit whose skirt dipped nearly to the ankles. She bore a potted plant in one arm and Miss Wilson's roll book in the other. Rimless spectacles glinted on her bony nose. Her hair was gray, like a witch's, skewered in a bun, and there was no question that she had witch's eyes. Roger had seen those same eyes leering from the pages of Hansel and Gretel. Identical they were. He gulped at the terrible presence. Form lines, I said. Girls in one, boys in the other. Poking, prodding, patrolling back and forth, the new teacher kneaded the grade into position and ruefully inspected the result. Sloppiest I've ever beheld. March! She clapped time with her hands, and the stunned students trooped into the classroom. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Girls on the window side, boys on the wall. Stand at your desks. Remove your outer garments. You, little miss with the vacant stare, what's your name? J- J- a voice squeaked. Speak up! I won't have mumblers. Jane Douglas. Well, Jane Douglas, you will be coat monitor. Collect the garments, a row at a time, and hang them neatly in the cloakroom. Did you hear me, child? Stop staring. Normally slow-moving Jane Douglas became a whirl of activity, charging up and down the aisles, piling coats in her arms. The new teacher tugged at her tweed jacket. Class be seated, hands folded on desks, she barked, and there was immediate compliance. She next paraded to the window and set the potted plant on the sill. Her witch's hands fussed with the green leaves, straightening, pruning. Plants and children belong in classrooms, she declared, looking over the rows. Can someone suggest why? There was total silence, punctured by a deranged giggle, quickly suppressed. Very well, I will tell you. Plants and children are living organisms. Both will grow well with proper care. Repeat, proper, not indulgent fawning or giving in to whims. With another tug at the jacket, she strode, ruler straight, to the desk in front of the room. I am Miss Orville. Orville, she spelled. You are to use my name in replying to all questions. In the back of the room, Jimmy Moore whispered frantically to Roger. What did she say her name is? Miss Orville rapped her desk. Attention, please. No muttering in the back. She cleared her voice and resumed. Prior to my retirement, I taught boys and girls for 46 years, she warned. I am beyond trickery, so I advise you to try none. You are to be in my charge until the return of Miss Wilson, however long that may be. She clapped her hands in front of her and trained her full scrutiny on the rows. Since I have no knowledge of your individual abilities, perhaps a look at the weekend's homework shall shed some light. Miss Wilson left me a copy of the assignment. You have all completed it, I trust. Take out your notebooks, please, at once. At once, I say. Roger's head spun dizzily around. He gaped at the monstrous tweed figure in dismay. Book bags were being clicked open, notebooks drawn out. What was he to do? He had gone to his room after the outing in the park yesterday, but alas, it had not been to complete his assignment. He watched, horrified, as the tweed figure proceeded among the aisles and inspected notebooks. What had she said her name was? Awful? Was that it? Miss Awful. Biting his lip, he listened to her scathing comments. You call this chicken scratch penmanship? Rip. A page was torn out and thrust at his owner. Redo it at once. It insults the intelligence. Then, moving on, what is this maze of ill-spelled words? Not a composition, I trust. Ill-spelled words. He was in for it for sure. The tweed figure was heading down his aisle. She was 3 desks away. No escaping it. Roger opened his book bag. It slid from his grasp and with a crash fell to the floor. Books, pencil case spilled out, baseball cards, the water pistol, the police whistle, the spool of string. Ah, crowed Miss Awful. Instantly at his desk, scooping up the offending objects. We have come to play, have we? And she fixed her witch's gaze on him. So then after school, Roger angrily complains to his mother, saying that the witch stole his toys that he accidentally brought to school and called all the students plants. He even refused to go get a soda because he didn't have time. He needed to do his spelling homework. He had punishment homework for spelling all the words wrong on that day's test. The next day, after school, the third graders marched out of the building with Ms. Orville calling to them like drill sergeant. She then yelled at one kid's mom for letting him watch 3 hours of television a night. She told her that her son was going to be a useless member of society at this rate. The parents thought about complaining to the headmaster, but she was only a temporary teacher, so they did not. The next morning, Roger refused to leave for school. "My shoes aren't shined," he wailed. "Not what Miss Awful calls shined. Where's the polish? I can't leave until I do 'em over." "Roger, if you'd only thought of it last night," sighed Miss Clark. "You sound like her," he cried. "That's what she'd say." And it gave his mother something to puzzle over for the rest of the day. She was still thinking about it when she joined the group of mothers outside St. Jeffrey's at 3. She had to admit it was sort of impressive, the smart, martial air exhibited by the third grade as they trooped down the steps. There was to be additional ceremony today. The ranks waited on the sidewalk until Miss Orville passed back and forth in inspection. Stationing at the head of the column, she boomed, "Good afternoon, boys and girls. Let us return with pens tomorrow." It was on Thursday that Nancy Reeves was shocked to receive a compliment from Miss Orville. "Mrs. Reeves, I rejoice to inform you of progress," Miss Orville had addressed her after the third grade had performed its military display for the afternoon. "On Monday, young Bruce's penmanship was comparable to a chicken's, if a chicken could write. Today I was pleased to award him an A." A tug at the tweed jacket and the stiff-backed figure walked down the street. Nancy Reeves stared after her until Miss Orville merged into the flow of pedestrians and traffic. On the way home, after supplying a lurid account of the day's tortures, "Miss Awful made Walter Meade stand in a corner for saying a bad word," Roger claimed angrily. "She's really a witch." "Don't call her that. It's rude and impolite," Mrs. Clark said as they turned into the brownstone doorway. "I can see your father and I have been too easy-going where you're concerned." "Huh? We've got worse names for her," Roger retorted. "Curse names. You should hear 'em. We're planning how to get even with Miss Awful. Just you see." Then it was Friday at St. Jeffrey's. For lunch, Miss Orville told the class, "I'm happy to inform you that Miss Wilson will be back on Monday." She held up her hand for quiet. "This afternoon will be my final session with you. Not that discipline will relax, but I might read you a story. Robert Louis Stevenson, perhaps. My boys and girls always enjoyed him so. 46 years for them. Joseph Lambert, you're not sitting up straight. You know I don't permit slouchers in my class." It was a mistake to have told the children that Miss Wilson would be back on Monday, that only a few hours of the terrible reign of Miss Awful were left to endure. Even before lunch, recess, A certain spirit of challenge and defiance had infiltrated into the room. Students still sat straight up, but not quite as straight. Tommy Miller dropped his pencil case on the floor and did not request permission to pick it up. "Ah, so what?" he mumbled, when Miss Orville reprimanded him. "What did you say?" she demanded, drawing herself up. "I said, so what?" Tommy Miller answered, returning her stare without distress. Roger thought that was neat of Tommy, talking back like that. He was surprised, too, because Miss Awful didn't yell at Tommy or anything. A funny look came into her eyes, he noticed, and she just went on with the geography lesson. And when Tommy dropped his pencil case again and picked it up without asking, she said nothing. Roger wasn't so certain that Tommy should have dropped the pencil case a second time. The lunch bell rang then, and he piled out of the classroom with the others, not bothering to wait for permission. At lunch, in the basement cafeteria, the third grade talked of nothing except how to get even with Miss Awful. The recommendations showed daring and imagination. "We could beat her up," Joey Lambert suggested. "We could wait at the corner till she goes by and throw rocks at her." "We'd get arrested," Walter Meade pointed out. "Better idea," said Bruce Reeves. "We could go upstairs to the classroom before she gets back and tie a string in front of the door. She'd trip and break her neck." "She's old," Roger Clark protested. "We can't hurt her like that. She's too old." It was one of the girls, actually, who thought of the plant. "That dopey old plant she's always fussing over," piped Midge Fuller. "We could rip off all the dopey leaves. That'd show her." Roger pushed back his chair and stood up from the table. "We don't want to do that," he said, not understanding why he objected. It was a feeling inside he couldn't explain. "Oh, let's forget about it," he said. "Let's call it quits." "The plant! The plant!" Midge Fuller squealed, clapping her hands. Postures were a good deal worse when the third grade reconvened after lunch. "Well, you've put in an industrious week, I dare say," Miss Orville commented. She opened the frayed volume of Treasure Island, which she had brought from home, and turned the pages carefully to Chapter 1. "I assume the class is familiar with the tale of young Jim Hawkins, Long John Silver, and the other wonderful characters." "No, I ain't," said Tommy Miller. "Ain't? What word is that?" "It's the word ain't," answered Tommy. "Ain't," somebody jeered. Miss Orville lowered her frayed volume. "No, children, you mustn't do this," she said with force. "To attend school is a privilege you must not mock. Can you guess how many thousands of children in the world are denied the gift of schooling?" Her lips quavered. "It is a priceless gift. You cannot permit yourselves to squander a moment of it." She rose from her desk and looked down at the rows of boys and girls. "It isn't enough any longer to accept a gift and make no return for it. Not with the world in the shape it's in," she said, spectacles trembling on her bony nose. "The world isn't a playbox," she said. "If I have been severe with you this past week, it was for your benefit. The world needs good citizens. If I have helped one of you to grow a fraction of an inch, if just one of you—" She stopped speaking. Her voice faltered. The words dammed up. She was staring at the plant on the window sill, which she had not noticed before. The stalks twisted up bare and naked where the leaves had been torn off. "You see," Miss Orville said after a moment, going slowly to the window sill. "You see what I'm talking about? To be truly educated is to be civilized. Here you may observe the opposite." Her fingers reached out to the bare stalks. "Violence and destruction." She turned and faced the class, and behind her spectacles her eyes were dim and faded. "Whoever is responsible, I beg of you only to be sorry," she said. When she returned to her desk, her back was straighter than ever, but it seemed to take her longer to cover the distance. At the close of class that afternoon, there was no forming of lines. Miss Orville merely dismissed the boys and girls and did not leave her desk. The children ran out, some in regret, some silent, others cheerful and scampering. Only Roger Clark stayed behind. He stood at the windows, plucking at the naked plant on the sill. Miss Orville was emptying the desk of her possessions, books, pads, a folder of maps. "These are yours, I believe," she said to Roger. In her hands were the water pistol, baseball cards, the spool of string. "Here, take them," she said. Roger went to the desk. He stuck the toys in his coat pocket without paying attention to them. He stood at the desk, rubbing his hands up and down his coat. "Yes?" Miss Orville asked. Roger stood back, hands at his side, lifted his head erectly. "Flower," he spelled. Flower. He squared his shoulders and looked at Miss Orville's brimming eyes. "Castle," Roger spelled. Castle. Then he walked from the room.